All right, back to you now. Glad to have you here for the conversation. Mark Chenoweth is joining me, the new Civil Liberties Alliance president. NCLA's recent advocacy for President Trump's absolute constitutional right to fire his executive branch. You know why? It's his executive branch. Mark, nice to see you again.
See you, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we were at CPAC together talking about this as well over the weekend. CPAC, pretty interesting get-together of folks. Look, Donald Trump can run the executive branch when it comes to like USAID, for example. It was created by an executive, right? It was created by the executive branch. And yet those on the left would have you believe, oh, it's unconstitutional. You can't touch anything unless we say you can. That's kind of their attitude, which is basically Donald Trump is not allowed to govern. That's kind of their attitude, isn't it?
I definitely think that they're trying to make sure that the administrative state can hold on to power, even though President Trump is onto them and he's trying to undo that, do a better job of that than he did in his first term. I think he's wise to their antics. I think USAID is a little trickier because Congress did come back in the late 90s, and there's a statute that was passed that sort of recognized the USAID existed. So I think that there's at least a stronger argument there for those advocates. The case that we were talking about Friday here with the Office of Special Counsel.
But before we leave USAID, let me ask you about this, though, because they're not talking about getting rid of USAID. What they're doing is trimming it from 10,000 employees to about 300 and closing some branch offices and so forth, which, by the way, we've had a guest on this phone program a number of times recently who's been to the USAID office in Cairo. Says it's a military complex. It's not grain and water. It's a military-grade complex, which, by the way, the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, about the most secure in the Middle East. You can find it on satellite pictures. You cannot find the USAID office on satellite pictures. Nothing good. What does that tell me about USAID? I don't think they're out there, putting sacks of grain in people's hands. I think they're doing something nefarious. Anyhow, can they trim it from 10,000 to 300? Is that legal?
Yes, I think they can. Yes, I think they can.
So there you go.
I think the president has the authority to do some reorganization like that. If the statute doesn't explicitly prevent that kind of thing, I think he has a lot of latitude as the head of the executive branch to do that kind of reorganization within USAID and a reduction in force.
So let's go back to the case we were discussing at CPAC over the weekend then. The president has tremendous latitude to run the executive branch. I mean, that is his job, right? And so there seems to be some confusion. And I don't understand this either, Mark, and I'd like you to help me with this. I don't understand how a federal district judge in some, district you've never heard of can shut down the entire country from whatever decision Donald Trump has made. It baffles me. It baffles a lot of folks. Take it from there.
Sure. So Hampton Dellinger is the head of the Office of Special Counsel. It is an office with 129 people. He's the sole person to run it. So he's a principal officer. He reports directly to the president. The Supreme Court has already talked about folks in that sort of special counsel role, the fact that they can be fired by the president at will. So in other words, even though Congress, when they set up the Office of Special Counsel, they put some tenure protections around that position and suggested that the president could only fire that person for some sort of malfeasance or failure to follow orders, that kind of thing. That's actually the Constitution supersedes that. The Constitution makes the president's power to remove at least these principal officers absolute. And Steve, the reason we know that is because the Constitution gives all of the executive power to the president. It does that in the vesting clause of Article 2 of the Constitution. Right. And then it limits his appointments power a little bit, right? It says advice and consent of the Senate for appointments, but it doesn't give the Senate or anyone else a role in removal. That's why we know the removal power is absolute.
Right. So to hear or to read in the New York Times or to CNN, MSNBC, by the way, who dumped Joy Reid and others over the weekend because they keep getting creamed, just as an aside to everything else. Every time that Donald Trump loses one of these district court deals or something, have a major setback for the Trump administration, huge law. None of these have been major setbacks yet, have they? These have been minor court skirmishes. I haven't seen a major setback yet that I would qualify as such. You?
I think skirmish is the right word. So what the Supreme Court did over the weekend in this case is or it might have been late Friday, they said, we're going to hold this in abeyance until Wednesday. The district court had the TRO, the temporary restraining order that the Judge Amy Berman Jackson put into effect will expire on Wednesday. She has a district court hearing set up to talk about more of the merits and a potential preliminary injunction in this case. and the Supreme Court said, we're going to hold this in abeyance until Wednesday. I think that's a signal to the district judge. Don't go any further with what you're doing. We'll see if the judge takes the hint or not. If the judge puts a preliminary injunction in effect, I expect the Supreme Court's next treatment of this case could be very different.
And so, I mean, when it comes to big decisions so far, Donald Trump seems to be on the right side of this. He seems to be coming out ahead, and the Trump administration. And look, Pam Bondi, a very accomplished, she's hated by the left, of course. She's an effective prosecutor, an effective attorney general. She's not pulling any punches. She's dead serious. And as all these places around the country try to play games with which rules they're going to follow, which ones are not, when it comes to federal law, I think they'll come out on the wrong end of that too. What say you?
I think that's right. I think Attorney General Bondi has behaved very well so far. Obviously, she hasn't been on the job for very long. But the president understands. He obviously went into office with a plan for how he wanted to get control of the executive branch. And I think he understands that some of the things that he's doing, some of the, for example, firing of people on these multi-member agencies, that is commissions that have maybe five bipartisan folks in charge of them, the Supreme Court might need to take another look at that before they uphold that action. But something like the firing of Mr. Dellinger, he's on very solid ground. The Supreme Court looked at this in the context of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau less than 5 years ago, and they decided that the president that those tenure protections around someone in that single head of an agency role can't withstand constitutional review. So they went away. The president's on very solid ground, and the fact that he is willing to exert the full extent of his executive authority, Steve, that isn't an indication that he's doing anything wrong. That's an indication that he's trying to get control of the unelected, unaccountable bureaucracy.
Yeah, the unelected, uncontrolled, unwavering bureaucracy, the folks that were never elected trying to run this thing from the shadows. I mean, that's what you're telling me, Mark. And that's going on for a long time. We got about a minute left here, not quite. How disruptive is all of this that Donald Trump's doing, whether it's Pam Bondi or Kash Patel or a host of these other disruptors? Is it working?
It seems to be working so far. I mean, the squeals from the administrative state tell you that they're concerned.
Yeah, they're squealing all right. Go on.
Well, look, the president learned his lesson, I think, is what we take from all this 4 years ago. He didn't quite get control of the administrative state until pretty late in his term. I think he decided this time around that was going to be a priority. He was going to get control of all of the offices, the heads of all the offices. He was going to get his people installed, people he trusted, people with loyalty to the policies and priorities of the administration. And so, he is working very hard with people like Attorney General Bondi to make sure that happens. And I'll throw out a compliment to the acting Solicitor General, Sarah Harris, who's been doing a terrific job defending these decisions in federal court.
Mark Chenoweth, New Civil Liberties Alliance president. Mark, always appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Good to be with you. NCLAlegal.org if folks want to check out this case or any others we're working on.
There you have it, ncla.org. Mark Chenoweth with us today. We'll take a break and be back. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Happy Monday to you.